Feminist Buzzkills, the show that is yet to receive our cabinet appointment.
I do have several post-election therapy appointments. Does that count?
Yes, it does.
Because that's what I need.
We all need that. We technically all have cabinet appointments with our therapists. I'm Liz Winstead, and that was my co-host, Moji O'Dale.
Hey, Buzzkills. Whew. We are struggling, and today's special episode is one that we all need. We're joined by two experts who will share vital tools to deal with all the shitty hot takes that are bound to come up over the holidays.
The hilarious liberal redneck Trae Crowder is here. An anti-racist educator and author of White Fragility, DiAngelo, joins as well. We're going to talk the intersections of racism and misogyny and hear tips on when to stand up and when to walk away from the post-election gloating that may happen over dinner in the next few months.
We recorded this for last year's holiday season, and it was such a great guide that it has now become our version of a holiday classic.
Right. How to deal with loved ones who voted for the evil pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
I wasn't dreaming of a white Christmas. Hate, actually, you get it.
We do get it. So we're skipping the news this week, skipping the deep dives into stories to get right to the tips.
So listen closely, take notes, and get your emotional prep on for the 2024 holiday hellscape. First up, he's a comedian, most recently writer of the travel guide Round Here and Over Yonder. He's also a massive star on stage and TikTok. Please welcome the liberal redneck himself, Trae Crowder. Hi, Trae.
Hey, Trae.
Hello. How y'all doing?
We're great. So, Trae, quickly.
Yes.
I looked up the definition of redneck, and it said poor, dirty, uneducated, racist, white Southern man. You don't seem to be all of those things.
No.
Like...
Only like half.
Yeah, I'm like, so by throwing the liberal in front, it's almost like a reclamation of sorts, but like, to be honest, you've got to walk me through it. I'm a Black woman, and Black people reclaim the N-words for ourselves. But my question, while you get into like walking it out for me, who are you reclaiming it for? Like fellow liberal rednecks, Northerners, so they can re-examine their Southern biases, all of it. Now I yield my time. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I grew up in Clay County, Tennessee, which is one of the most like economically impoverished and rural parts of the deep red state of Tennessee. And growing up, everybody there kind of just like self-identified as rednecks without even really thinking about it. But more so, like, I feel like I live in Southern California now, and I'm the most seemingly redneck person that most people encounter just from like my accent, the way I talk and that type of thing. But I'm also super progressive and always have been. And I just felt like a liberal redneck as a character or as a name for video series. I just felt like it was the most efficient way to get across the dynamic that I have in the videos. You know what I mean? And I felt like people would see that and be like, what is that? That's not a thing. And then they click it, and then hopefully by the end, it makes at least a little more sense. But yeah, when you listed off the boxes to check to be a redneck, it was going fine till you got to racist. Then I was like, okay, well, not that one. I do think it was effective in that way when I like first went viral. So I don't regret it or anything. I didn't like thoroughly think through all the implications of that whole thing, to be honest with you.
Oh, I like it. I think it's a kind of arresting. It's just unexpected. I was like, okay, for me personally, I'm sorry, redneck feels like a slur, which is why I looked it up. And I was like, can I say that?
You can tell. As far as I'm concerned, anybody can say it. My buddy Roy Wood Jr. from The Daily Show is a great comedian. I've known him for a long time. He's from Alabama, and he's always been like, always looked up to Roy. When this was all first starting, like he told me he didn't think that I should use that in the name because it was like, and he tried to tell me, he's like, I think it's got like a real serious implication to a lot of people that, you're maybe not taking into account, but I was already kind of in it at that point, you know what I mean? But I did start like on my YouTube channel, and I don't go on stage as the liberal redneck. Like I'm try to mostly go by just my name, Trae Crowder, but like I still make the videos and they are what they are. But yeah, it's contentious, I suppose, with some people.
Trae, we travel a whole bunch in the South. Like we do these comedy shows that bring on abortion providers and the activists that are working. We're not traveling to Portland, Oregon. We're in Birmingham and Oklahoma City. And we've been to Huntsville and Mobile and Knoxville and Memphis, and there's so many dope liberals in the South.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I'm just so glad that, people can have a conversation whether you should say redneck, whether you should not. But if the conversation is getting Northern white liberals to like click on it and see that they shouldn't say shit like just secede, because I've never
Yeah.
met more fighters than people who know they're maybe not even going to win,
Right.
but are just hell bent on saying, we are not going to just allow this one voice stand so that people think that that's the voice of who we all are. And I think it's pretty cool.
When I first went viral and stuff, I got so many comments from people from outside the South, coastal liberals or whatever, people in big cities saying something along the lines of like, you're like a unicorn. You know what I mean? Like you're like saying, I didn't know that people like you existed or whatever. And the whole time I was like, no, I'm not the only one. But even at my shows, other liberal Southerners, especially if they're from a small town, they'll show up to a show I do in Nashville or whatever, and they'll be like, I thought I was the only one in my hometown. You know what I mean? Even some of them, they call themselves closeted liberals and all this stuff because they're the blue sheep of their family, all these things. But there's more of us than people realize. And that's the Moji asked earlier, is like, if that was what I was trying to do, get people from outside the South to recognize that. And I mean, yeah, that is important to me, and also something I'm proud of. Sometimes people are like, are you trying to change people's minds? And they say that and they mean stereotypical Trump loving redneck types, and they mean, am I trying to change their minds? And it's not that I wouldn't like to, I just don't think that I can for the most part, but I know I can reach people in other places and show them another side of where I'm from, basically, which I do care about.
But I also think one thing that's super cool, and I know from the work that we do traveling around, is if you have a bunch of progressive minded folks doing a show in Little Rock or in Huntsville, you get every single progressive together in that room, and then they find each other. And that is really cool. They'll go, oh, I work with that person, or there's my neighbor. And I think that those things are really cool. So it's not just for the Northerners, but it's for other folks to find each other together.
That happens all the time at my shows. And I've had people tell me they met people at my shows who they like now keep in touch with. It because it is or especially for these people who did think like they came in from some smaller town, they think they're the only one. They get there and there's, whatever, 400 people or something at this show. It's heartening and encouraging to them. And it is kind of a beautiful thing. It's very cool. Another thing people misunderstand is I'll do morning radio in Portland or whatever. And they'll be like, so when you tour like back in the South, like, how does that go? They think, and I'm always like, those are the best shows I ever have because it's my people that are coming to those shows. And what we just talked about is the reason why my best shows are all in the South. Not to say that I don't also have great ones in Portland and San Francisco. I do.
There's this perception that redneck is a Southern thing, but like, let's be honest, America has had racist, uneducated whiteness baked in, like even in New York, right? Even in Oregon.
Yeah.
And non-Southern whites sort of thinking that they have some claim to enlightenment is kind of laughable. Like, come on, read the room.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to those people?
I mean, yeah, you ain't no better than me or no better than us. That's it's like my mantra as a, being who I am. But, yeah, that was one of the first big revelations I had. Not that I was all that shocked by it when I started touring full time, like 7 years ago, going all around the country, was that like, you drive across the state of Washington from like Spokane to Seattle, and it's pretty rednecky in between. You know what I mean? It looks a lot like driving across Alabama, maybe not in terms of topography, but in terms of Trump signs and jacked up trucks and that type of thing. And it's like that in California too, between San Francisco and LA, pretty much every state, and it's like you realize it's not a geographical divide so much as it's like a urban rural divide, I guess. And we have a lot of the same types of people in almost every state in this country. That, and also everybody looks at the red states and they just see a big swath of red without realizing that or even if they see a map of a state like Tennessee, it's mostly red with these tiny little dots of blue, but those tiny little dots are where huge amounts of people
live. Right.
Yeah, right. And people don't think about that stuff.
And I also think too, and we're going to bring on Robin now, but like racism is baked into all of us because it's foundationally part of our country, right? And so people are desperately trying to find some kind of respectability play for themselves, that they have some kind of like enlightenment, when there is no way to live in this country and not have had it into your upbringing some kind of racist bias that you either are going to decide to work on or you're going to decide to not, right? And so I think that this is a perfect time to bring Robin on just to talk about like where we're at. So Moji, do you want to introduce her?
Absolutely. She's an anti-racist educator, author of several books, including White Fragility, which you may have read, and most recently, Seeing Whiteness. Please welcome Robin DiAngelo. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Moji. Hi, Liz.
Hey.
Hello.
It's so good to have you here because it's like, I love Trae's work so much. I love your work. And I just think that when we talk about these divides and how we talk about who cedes the moral high ground, all this false narrative around people who have better experiences, who better than all of us to sort of have this conversation, right? Trae, you and I sort of through our comedy try to take on some of this shit. And Robin, you analyzing and helping folks understand that we're all a little bit or a lot racist, and like how we choose to deal with it is sort of the path that we're going to talk about. And just also laying out how racism and misogyny just go hand in hand. And so I guess the first thing that I wanted to ask you, Robin, is talk a little bit about white fragility and male fragility and how they both sort of come into play, especially when we talk about how we talk about abortion.
Well, there's a quote that comes to my mind, and I don't know who said it, but I do love it. When you're used to 100%, 98 feels oppressive. You're challenging whiteness, white advantage, white positionality, you're going to get white fragility, right? And I want to be really clear when I use the term fragile, I don't mean fragile like delicate, I mean fragile like a bomb, right? Like hold it carefully because it's not going to take much for it to blow. And then there's going to be a lot of like fallout, right? And where I don't want white women to get out from under, I don't want us to use sexism as a way out, right? I want us to use sexism, misogyny, patriarchy as a way in. White women don't have any less racism than white men. We just enact it differently based on our socialization. But when you put whiteness and maleness together, of course, you're also going to get male fragility, right? I don't think any boy grows up not knowing it's better to be a boy than a girl. I mean, nobody misses that message. You can resist it, you can challenge it, but you can't miss it any more than you can miss the message that it's better to be white. Nobody misses that message. And so, yeah, we all absorb it. What we do with it, how we enact it, that's where maybe we can be individuals, but at the group level, we're all swimming in the same water, right? And I love what Ibram Kendi says. We may not be the producers of racist ideology, but we've all been the consumers, right? And so for me as a white person, I want white people to change their question from if they've been shaped by racism, because most, if you ask if you have, most white people say, no, not at all. Only message I ever got was human equality. Change your question from if to how were you shaped by racism, right? And then you can look at all those intersecting identities. I actually grew up urban poor. And so I learned my place in the racial hierarchy different than maybe a middle-class white girl would or a rural white male would, but I learned it, right? And I actually can't talk about growing up poor without also talking about growing up white. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if Trae can relate to this. I mean, when I say urban poverty, I mean homelessness and living in our car and welfare and a lot of shame. My mom could not take care of us. We were not fed well or clothed, and we were literally dirty. And there was a lot of shame about that. And yet I can remember over and over being warned never to touch things that a colored person could have touched. The message was really clear. Had I touched that thing, sat on that seat, I would be dirty. Now, the reality was that we were dirty. But in those moments, we projected that shame and that dirt onto Black people, basically. And it realigned us with the dominant white culture that our poverty separated us from, if that makes sense. I see how we used Black people, right? We might have been at the bottom, but there was somebody below us, right? I think that's the great bargain made with owning class whites and working class whites, right? I'm going to exploit your labor. I'm going to give you something. You're going to always get to be better than the Black man.
Okay. I actually really love that explanation. I mean, it really acknowledges that we are intersections, right? All of us are. And it's not that we're one thing. To bring it back to abortion, because we are an abortion podcast. And it's historically been a topic that is hard to talk about. And of course, the tenets of white supremacy play such a role in like not only how anti-abortion people, but also well-meaning pro-choice people have perpetuated the stigma that have led us to this terrible anti-abortion precipice that we're on right now. So I'd ask you, what are some of the ways that we see playing out that can shift the narrative as we talk about abortion?
I mean, I think it helps to counter this narrative that it's always something that you regret or that's, deeply upsetting and tragic. I have actually had 2 abortions. I have no shame, no regrets. Neither of them were any big deal. I had a child in between those 2 abortions. So it's not as if, I'd never experienced childbirth. I was very clear that was not the right time for me. just to be able to say that and to see that not everybody finds this a difficult decision to make. Some people it's just clear as a bell.
It's true.
But yeah, we need other stories because the reality is there is a lot of shaming and prejudice. And as a white person who breaks with white solidarity, at least I try to, I get a lot of that anyway. So it's like, here it goes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about something Liz had asked about the relation between white supremacy and misogyny and abortion. And I do think that when it comes to talking about abortion, we're not in the dominant position as women, right? So we're not also dealing with racism, right? So when I talk about my abortion, I risk being shamed. I risk being seen as immoral, but I'm not also risking having that reduced to my race. So I don't want to proceed as if that isn't in there. But within patriarchy, we are in the subordinate position. This is why I proudly identify as not just a feminist, but an angry feminist. But I don't center patriarchy in my work. I bring it in, but I center whiteness because there I'm in a dominant position. I have a very different voice. And even the way my body feels when I stand there and speak about whiteness, challenge it. It feels really different than when I stand there and try to challenge patriarchy.
Absolutely.
And Trae, I want to bring you in here because as we have been doing this abortion work, I literally would go to watch your responses as all of this shit came flying out of the States.
Mm-hmm.
And I marvel at how A, hilarious you are, B, that you know how to talk about abortion without shame and stigma, without centering yourself, and also truly getting the information that apparently mainstream media can't pick up a fucking piece of paper and read or talk to advocates. A, why do you think it's important? And B, I want to know where you're getting your information and your research because the way you talk about it is so dope.
Well, first of all, thank you. It means a lot coming from you. That's very, very kind of you. With the abortion stuff, I mean, I think about all my videos, but anytime it's like abortion related, I really try to actually think about it because I'm very sensitive to the fact, like the part of me feels like it's not really my place to even be talking about this. But the other side of it is like, being an ally in any of these causes, you know what I mean? So I try to, usually I'll make some self-deprecating joke about how as a straight white man, I'll take any opportunity to give my opinion on abortion, and then get into the, whatever it is I want to say. And I know a lot of times I've focused on just the hypocrisy usually is where I try to center, my ire, the hypocrisy of their policies. So yeah, I self-identified poor white trash in rural Tennessee. And like, I'm just always sensitive to the way economic issues and how much it sucks to be poor and how shitty poor people are treated across this country and their disdain and hatred for babies that are born poor. I mean, it's been pointed out a million times, but like, it's vitally important to them that these babies must be born. But as soon as they are born, then they could give a shit less what happens to them. And like, I am not down with that. See, in my head, I feel like I have a perspective on like, ain't that part of it. I just try to find a place to focus on it that makes sense. That's where I get my information. I mean, I try to get from all over the place. Like when there's something that comes up, I know I want to talk about, I just do a lot of Googling and looking around and reading a bunch of different articles from different places. Growing up, because of where I grew up, this was like viewed as very, very cold hearted at the time and whatnot. I was like, pro-choice as like a teenager in Salina and like the Bible Belt. And that was always weird. And that people would ask me why. And I was like, I saw so many kids in so many terrible situations, right? In Salina all the time. As a cold, angsty teenager, I was like, they probably would have been better off having never been born. You know what I mean? Like I know a lot of people that are like that. And I just don't think that if no one's going to take care of them after the fact, then why are we standing in the way of that? Like everybody talks about how the immorality of abortion and they just, but I'm not going to do anything about it. It's not up to me to help the unwanted children. And I just think that that's a bunch of baloney.
That is one of my favorite kinds of hypocrisy, the people who are like, oh no, abortion, but then personal responsibility in parenthood. And it's like, abortion is a responsible choice.
Right. Yeah, of course it is.
Personal
responsibility.
Of course it is. So I'm just going to jump because the reason we asked you both here is that it's the end of November and we are heading home for the holidays. And so we all, ourselves and our listeners, need to bring our anti-racist, anti-sexist selves to the table and have hard conversations to counter not just the overt racist and sexist relatives, but also the subtle commentary that can be a little bit more prevalent and a little more cutting. And so, with the world being a 75 alarm fire of awful, we hope that folks listening to us can get some insight and some tools to talk with relatives, often difficult ones, over this holiday season. So Liz, why don't you just lay out one of the first scenarios?
Some of the things that I think that people struggle with a lot, and I know I struggle with a lot because I am a person who is from Minnesota. Half of my family is from Philadelphia, Mississippi, which is not only racist, but is the epicenter of like some terrible shit. So how do we set boundaries in advance can we even do that? Can you set boundaries before you go? If you know that people are just going to be pushing buttons on purpose?
First of all, when this topic comes up, and it comes up to me a lot this time of year, for a lot of people like want to ask me about fans at shows and stuff, I always feel a little guilty because the truth is, I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of blue sheep in their family. Like my wife's a blue sheep in her family, but I'm actually not. My mom's a Democrat who hates Trump. My uncle's, a gay, a religious man who's president of the Clay County Democratic Party. My sister's a little liberal hippie. And so like, I don't get into these situations that much outside of my in-laws, but I was going to my wife's family, and this was when they were huge Duck Dynasty fans, right? And my wife's family was. Like every Christmas present, there was some kind of Duck Dynasty merch. They're obsessed with it.
Yikes.
Yeah, tell me about it. And the guy, Phil, the patriarch of Duck, he was in hot water at the time because he had said some homophobic stuff, right? In some interview. I don't remember exactly, whatever, called it an abomination, played all the hits, whatever he did. And that had just happened. And I told my wife before, I was like, I'm telling you right now, before we go down there, I was like, I'm not going to put up with none of that shit. If they start talking about how he's been railroaded for just saying what everybody's thinking or that type of thing, I was like, I'm not going to have that. It's like, I'm not going to be able to keep quiet if that happens. And she assured me it wouldn't be a problem. And then it wasn't. And I don't know if she talked to her mama, who is cool, who maybe, put the feelers out or what. So I've tried it at least once and it seemed to work okay. I think it's a fair enough thing to do. I did have my wife as a buffer though, so it's a little different maybe.
Robin, any tips?
Yeah, I definitely have 3 overarching guidelines. I would hope.
Love it.
The first one is that it is a really common question for white people to ask. And of course, it's, like, how do I tell so-and-so about their racism? And I like to look at them and say, well, how would I tell you about yours? Because that question always presumes it's not me. I'm going to go forth and let everybody else know. But I think a lot of times when people are asking, what they really want to know is, how do I say something with no consequence or risk whatsoever? How do I say something with no loss and remain comfortable, right? And you can't. I don't think you can expect that. I think that's basically white solidarity, right? White solidarity is the unspoken agreement that we'll just keep each other comfortable. We'll protect each other around our racism, white to white. And so you just don't expect it to be without consequence. You want to minimize that, but also don't wait until you're relaxed and articulate, and because that's not going to happen, right? Like if you well, I just don't know what to say and I have to say just the right thing. It's messy and your heart's probably going to be pounding and you might be inarticulate, but do you want to be able to sleep that night? Do you want to be in your integrity? There's a book I never read, but the title has supported me throughout my life, which is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. In other words, don't expect it not to be hard. And lastly, I would say do it for you, not for them. So yes, I hope this person shifts as a result of me having said this, but I have to do it. I have to break with this. I have to heal the way that I have been conditioned into this thing. I have to be able to look myself in the mirror tonight and know that what I profess to believe is aligned with how I actually behave. And that kind of actually gives you permission to not be elegant and not be graceful and not be clear, but by God, you did it. You said something. And just for that moment, they had to hear a counter narrative. They didn't get to put that out there with no discomfort coming back at them. So those are some guidelines I would offer. I have some specific strategies, but I'll pause and see if Trae has any that he wants to share.
I mean, I think the last thing you said, that is the important part, because especially in places like where I'm from, they just spout this stuff off because it's taken for granted that everyone there is on the same page as them. And I do think it's important to at least make them aware of the fact that that is not true.
I also just want to say too that having been someone who pushes back all the time at those dinners, I'm still invited back and they still love me. And I think that doing it for you is huge. And also, I want to also say, I feel like it's really important to always push back because I feel like, I'm the person who will be there and say it and get no backup, right? From my liberal, quiet sisters. And then they'll say, can you make sure that this doesn't happen? And I said, why are you talking to me? Why are you talking to me and telling me to always keep the peace? Fuck that shit. I didn't bring up this. I didn't say it. This person's saying something that's harmful. I have friends who don't look like me. And I can't go out and say Black Lives Matter at a protest and then come home and be like cowering that, Aunt Racity Race is like saying something shitty. Like, that's not okay.
It's funny because that's always how it happens, right? Is like they say all this crazy stuff. You might bite your tongue for a second. Then you speak up. And then like 30 seconds later, everybody's like, classic Liz. Why does Liz always have to do this? What is it with Liz? Why does she do this every year? Whatever, when it's, when of course, it should be the other way around. But yeah, that's one of the parts that's so frustrating about it.
I know. And that's one of the parts, like, Robin, I want you to dive into strategies because I'm drooling like you're a steak that's medium rare.
So white fragility is a really powerful tool to keep us in our places, right? Like, I mean, we also get it at coming at us. I mean, there's a reason we hesitate to say anything because often things are going to get worse and it's going to escalate, or that's what we fear will happen, right? But I think, like, why should the water spit me out? Why doesn't it spit, Uncle Bob out? Right? Like,
yes.
Why is the culture one in which I'm the one that has to be silent? Right? Let's switch that. So basically, I point the finger inward, not outward. Like, that to me is like, if you do like this, that is racist. You are racist. There are times if somebody's explicitly, like, they've seen the N-word or something, like, there's a time and a place where I think you have to just say, no, that's not acceptable in my presence. But oftentimes it's more slippery than that. You know darn well what they're talking about, but they didn't come out and say it, or it's less direct. So I just try to bring down the defensiveness and somehow connect. Like, I hear you. I have had that thought myself. In fact, I used to see it that way. So right now, like, hey, I'm connected with you because odds are you have. Come on. I mean, we've all absorbed this stuff. But as a result of, you can say, conversations I've had the opportunity to have with my friend Moji, or, something that I read or something that I watched, I have come to realize, and then you just speak how you have come to see it, the insight you have gained. It's hard to argue with my insight, right? It doesn't mean they won't, but I'm not telling you how to think or what you are. I'm just saying, well, I can relate, but here's for me. And they had to hear that counter narrative, and you were in your integrity. There's one other thing I would add. You can freeze. I mean, in the moment, you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to say. And it's okay to return to it later. My sister is really challenging for me, but I know her really well. And I know when she's open and I know when she's not. And so sometimes I just wait, and then I get at a time when she's open and I say, hey, can I talk to you about what happened at dinner? God, I've been thinking about it, and it's really been bothering me. And then she said, oh, what? She wants to know, right? Well, what is it? Well, when you said, it sounded like, did you mean that? Right? So it's at a different time. We're out of the public situation. I mean, that's not always a strategy because sometimes, the rest of the group doesn't know that you addressed it. But if that one would work, go for it.
I think those are good. And Trae, I was wondering for you before we wrap up, do you find, and sometimes I will find for myself, if it's two people that are fighting, that humor can diffuse, like that you can be the diffuser?
I mean, the truth is that's my personal number one strategy in these situations is, yes, I try to like deflect with humor usually or whatever. And sometimes it's like self-deprecate. If they start like coming at me, I'll like, start making whatever jokes at my own expense or whatever they're doing, just anything to sort of like disarm them, I guess, and lighten the mood. But I mean, yeah, that's always been kind of my natural instinct. Definitely think that helps.
I do too. I think it really helps. All right. Last thoughts, everybody. You're all amazing. Moji, you want to get on last thoughts?
I mean, I don't have to deal with my racist relatives. We're all Black, and the white people who come in, we vet them first. It helps.
Good call. Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, the truth is in my family, I don't either. Well, I mean, my Meemaw, she's still a Meemaw, but like a lot of people have a lot worse than I do. So I'm reminded of that every year. So
I think for me, it's like, if you haven't ever stood up to the challenge of somebody saying things that you don't believe, just do it, because I'm going to just go back to Robin. You will sleep better knowing that you keep sitting in the light of your own belief system. We just will. And why should you have to take on all of that garbage and just let it sit there? That is something that eats away at you. It doesn't eat away at them. So remember that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking you also always have to be doing your own work. I mean, I know my people really well, and I know how easily we want to get out of it, and it's always about somebody else. The more you're doing your own work on what you've been conditioned into, I think the more that these kind of strategies will come naturally to you. But if you yourself are doing nothing to address your own racism, and then you're just going to put yourself in the position to call out everybody at the table, I think that's a bit hypocritical. So, you also have to be in good shape. Not a matter of niceness. Niceness is not anti-racism, right? It actually takes ongoing, lifelong work. It's a process, and you need to be involved in it too.
Yeah, you don't want to be some kind of like social justice Hufflepuff. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that out of you.
That was great.
Oh my goodness.
Trae, where can people find you?
Oh yeah, TraeCrowder.com, TRAE Crowder, and Trae Crowder on all the socials. But yeah, you can find my tour dates on there. Come and see me. Check out my book, Round Here and Over Yonder, Comedic Travel Guide with Corey Ryan Forrester, and listen to my podcast and all that comedian stuff. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. And Robin, can you tell people where they can find you and where they can support the work you do?
Yeah, thank you. I have a website, robindiangelo.com. I have a book, Nice Racism, which is written precisely for white progressives, my follow-up to white fragility. And I also teach online courses on how to facilitate white affinity work, where white people are working with one another to address our conditioning. So check it out.
Oh my God. You both are so awesome. I hopefully will get to see both of you in person because you both are really inspirational. And thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll put all that stuff in the show notes, folks. So don't worry. You can get all their stuff. You don't have to remember a darn thing. That's our show. Thanks so much for listening. And thanks to Trae Crowder and Robin DiAngelo for being our forever guides on how to handle this holiday fuckery. We hope it helps you get through the holidays and through life when the people in your life start spewing some bullshit. And reminder that at any point you need a lift and a dose of support, you can stream the documentary all about our work at Abortion Access Front called No One Asked You. It is streaming online at jolt.film or with the Jolt app. You can go to Google TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Android TV, all the TVs streaming now through December 29th. Watch it and tell everyone to do the same. Link in our show notes. Escaping into your room alone with a bunch of activists for 90 minutes just could be what you need this holiday season.
The FBK Pod is on the front lines and has the latest news on all things abortion. Like, subscribe, and show us some love with a 5-star rating. And stay connected on social media at Abortion Front on all the socials. And turn that enragement into engagement.
And to further support our work, join our Patreon. You'll get great content and cool FBK merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. You can pledge at patreon.com/feminist buzzkills.
And after you watch the movie, or will you be looking for somewhere you might fit in to do some abortion activism? We've got a 5-part activist training series, Operation Save Abortion, at operationsaveabortion.com. You can visit our super cool activist calendar, which is full of local and national actions and educational opportunities. On December 5th, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, Catholics for Choice is hosting Beyond the Divide, Clarifying Our Values About Abortion, a virtual workshop that provides a safe, facilitated environment to reflect on complex questions around abortion and reproductive rights. The all-day event includes exploration of personal values, a survey of values-based questions on abortion, and a discussion of real-life scenarios. Link is in our show notes and in the Activist Cal.
We're off next week, hopefully having these important conversations with our family, and hope that we've given you some conversation tools going into the holiday season and beyond. We're back with a new episode December 6th with amazing guests, all the latest abortion news updates, and actions for you to fight these fuckers.
FBK is edited by Remy de Tournay and is produced by Abortion Access Front. On behalf of Liz, myself, and the whole FBK and AF team, we hope your holiday season is full of joy, support, and safety. Rest up, we have work to do.
And finally, we leave you with turkey taint Charlie Kirk, a man who's showing his whole ass and warning his listeners about conservatives' greatest enemy, Pop music fans. Gobble, gobble.
Taylor Swift is going to come out in the presidential election and she's going to mobilize her fans. I'll be nice. And we're going to be like, oh, wow, where did all these young female voters come from? We better have a plan for that. Taylor Swift, I think she put up one voter registration link and she registered millions and millions. And let's just be honest, all the Swifties want is swift abortion.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.